So if you suddenly landed in a world where there was going to be an apocalypse and you didn't know what form that apocalypse was going to take, would you be able to prepare for it? That's exactly the situation that Harry, Sirius and Remus found themselves in On Whom the Pale Moon Gleams by Sif Shadowheart, which is a Harry Potter Walking Dead crossover. It starts at just before the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, when they're heading for the Thestrals, ready to fly there. And it continues through until Sirius goes through the veil, and that's the point of divergence between Harry Potter and this story, in that in this case Harry goes through the veil with Sirius and Remus follows along as well. They find themselves in the Walking Dead universe a few years before the outbreak, and they find themselves with a bunch of resources that was given to them by Luna. The story is complete, so you don't have to worry about waiting for updates or it being abandoned or anything like that. And it is 16 chapters, 100,970 words, so it's a nice length. After the outbreak does happen, Harry runs into Merle on a supply run while he's still chained up and about to cut off his hand. And that's where the story proper begins. And it basically follows Harry's trip with the group and how he gets along with the other people in the group, and he's really only following along, trying to decide whether any of them are worth bringing back to his own base with his family, where he is preparing for the survival of the human race. There is death in childbirth in this story, so if that's something that's going to bother you, I suggest skipping over chapter 15/14. Chapter 15 in the menu, but it's called chapter 14. Some of the tags I would attach to this are dimension travel, because they go through the veil into another world. Mpreg, for those of you who don't know, that's male pregnancy. Alpha Harry, as in alpha male, not ABO alpha. Dr. Harry, well, almost doctor. He's just completed his first year of medical school when the outbreak happens. He's very smart and intelligent. At the beginning, in the prologue, there's a bit of Dumbledore, Ron and Hermione bashing, but like I said before, after the prologue, it's all in the Walking Dead universe, so you won't see any of those characters again. The main pairings are Harry and the Dixon brothers, so it's a triad. And also it's Wolfstar, so Sirius and Remus are together as well. For those of you who are bothered by it, Harry's name in the story is Hadrian. I know some people don't like that, so I thought I should probably let you know. It's up to you whether you can put up with it or whether you want to skip the story all up. The rating on this story is mature, and I would absolutely 100% agree with that. There are some sex scenes, although some of them are censored. The smut is in chapters 10, 12, 13 and 14, so you can skip those chapters if you want to read the story but just want to skip the smut parts. The timeline of it being in the Department of Mysteries is established immediately in the prologue author notes. If you're the sort of person who likes to skip over the author notes, it's also established in the first paragraph of the prologue, so you don't have to worry about missing things in the author notes there. The first sentence of the story is, "Harry Potter, you listen this instant." And I love that first sentence. I think it's a brilliant first sentence. It immediately catches the attention of the reader and it forces us to take notice. It's emphatic. Merle is an absolute riot in this when he's around kids. I think it's absolutely hilarious seeing the scenes when he's around the children once they're in the Blacklands. Harry is confident and assertive. He's opinionated and he's not afraid to show it. He's kind and compassionate still, but he's not flawless. He is calculating, he is ruthless, and at times when he gets riled up, he can be a bit cruel. I especially enjoyed the interactions between Harry and Dr. Jenner at the CDC. They were very poignant and they gave us a bit of an insight into Harry's professional knowledge as he had discussions with Dr. Jenner. And it was interesting, the connection with Harry having learned from Dr. Jenner's wife. We do get to find out what happens to Neville and Luna briefly in the first chapter after they make it into the new world. So you're not left up in the air about what happens to them, but then you don't hear about them at all after that, really. Except for when, Harry mentions them in passing as, missing his friends or whatever like that. The story is very easy to follow regardless of which fandom you're in. So if you're from the Harry Potter fandom and you don't know anything about Walking Dead, you don't have to worry about not knowing the story. It is covered really well on Whom the Pale Moon Gleams. You won't miss out on anything. You won't feel like you're not understanding what's going on. It's all written really well. For the Walking Dead fans who maybe don't know anything about Harry Potter, you might be a little bit lost in the prologue, but after that, you're fine. You should be fine because there's not much. There's magic and everything, but it's all in the Walking Dead universe, so you should be fine. The relationship between Harry and the Dixon brothers is sweet, but it's not sickly sweet. It's the kind of gruff, outdoorsy kind of sweet that just makes your heart want to sort of go, oh. I love how the Blacks are planning for the long-term survival of mankind and not just concentrating surviving the here and now. So they're building up resources, they're making sure that there's not going to be a genetic bottleneck and things like that. The story does contain a fair bit of cursing and other types of foul language such as racial slurs. So if that's the sort of thing that's going to bother you, you may want to skip over this story because it's right throughout, which is probably absolutely no surprise to the Walking Dead fans because it's right throughout the Walking Dead series as well. A couple of interesting quotes that I want to include here. One of them is, "Trouble as always, following Rick Grimes like fleas on a hound." And I really like that quote because I love the imagery of the simile there, and also because it reminds me very much of Harry himself, because trouble follows him around like fleas on a hound as well. So it's kind of a sort of correlation there. Another quote that I really liked was the first sentence from chapter 3/2, and that is, "It's happened." And I love that quote because it has an ominous feel to it. It has a finality and a gravity to it. And it reminds me of the transition between books 4 and 5 in the Harry Potter series as well. It's like, this is where all the, not innocent, but all the light-hearted stuff finishes, and we're moving on to the darker part of the story. So it sort of works as a transition. I just really love that sentence. I think it's perfectly placed. The other quote that I wanted to share was, "Raz was 3 now, and Jamie 2. And they were growing up in a world where the dead came back to life and were hungry." And I really like that passage because as a parent, that really resonated with me, and when I read it, I found it quite difficult and upsetting. And also because it reminds me very much of Molly in the Harry Potter, when Voldemort's back, but the Wizarding War hasn't started outright yet. The Ministry is denying Voldemort's return, and Molly is absolutely terrified for the safety of her children, and she comes across a boggart which shows all of her children dead. And I feel that passage just reminded me of that scene, and it was just heartbreaking, really. The story itself is funny, it's engaging, it draws the reader in and keeps you there. It's one of those I don't want to put it down type stories. The merging of the two fandoms is done really well and in a believable way, so it doesn't feel out of place and it doesn't feel contrived. I was completely invested in the characters, especially Harry and the Dixons. If you are a fan of Laurie or Shane or Rick, then this is not the story for you, because they're bashed pretty hard in this story. If you are a fan of Daryl or Mel, though, you probably will enjoy this story. You'll get the opportunity to dig a little bit deeper into their characters and have a look at what they're like below the surface. And as I said earlier, the relationship between Harry and the Dixons is absolutely sweet. It's such a cute relationship. You're just rooting for them the entire time. And it was nice not to have any of them written in as being submissive. It was nice to have them all still retain their masculinity and their fact that none of them dominate over any of the other people in the relationship. I'm a sucker for Alpha Harry. I love Harry when he's written as calm, confident, in control, and doesn't take crap from anybody, and is in charge of his own destiny. I just really love when Harry's written as a strong character, and the author of this story does that really well. As far as grammar and spelling go, for the most part, this story is really well written. I picked a couple of mistakes, but they were nitpicky, so it was really well written story and worth your time. You're not going to be struggling through bad spelling or bad grammar to try and get through the story. Overall, I gave this story, On Whom the Pale Moon Gleams, an 8 out of 10. I'm definitely going to reread it, and I'm going to reread it frequently, so it's going to be stored on my Kindle to stay. I'm not sure what site it's going to be on, but if you want to click on the BookTube newbie tag, you'll find all about me or about my channel. Meanwhile, if you want to let me know in the comments, are you interested in this story, or have you read it already? Did you enjoy it as much as I did if you have read it? If you have any similar recommendations, I'm open for them. Well, until next time, happy reading!